I have done it. I have finished the Yugioh original series. Going from the very first episode of Yugioh versus Kaiba all the way to the finale of Yugioh versus the Pharaoh in the final. I watched the 3 Yugioh movies. I've already talked about the first movie, about how it had the potential to be incredible, but it it kind of didn't stick the landing in a way that it needed to. And I'll also be talking about the Dark Side of Dimensions in its own little movie. And I'll probably talk about Bonds Beyond Time, either in its own movie or in this one, because Bonds Beyond Time came in this box set collection. In this box set collection, we have here every single page. It's basically set up like a book of every little 2 discs every season of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Original from Yugi and Kaiba. The only things this collection is missing is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie and Bonds Beyond and Dark Side of Dimensions. Dark Side of Dimensions, it makes sense why it's not included in this set, because it hadn't released by the time this set came out. But the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie, I don't know why it wasn't included in this box set. It should have been included in this box set, but maybe there was some issues with licensing or whatever, because honestly, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie, to my knowledge, has never been re-released outside of that initial DVD/VHS release. I have never seen a re-release in regards to hard copies of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie, the first one. So maybe there's some issues with trying to get that thing re-released. Maybe some licensing problems. Who knows? But everything else outside of those 2 films regarding Yugi and Kaiba are in here. And the enemy, this is the 4Kids version of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Story. So naturally, you're gonna get all the censor stuff. There's only English is the option. You can't switch to Japanese, to my knowledge. Though in the Dark Side of Dimensions, you could do that. You could switch from English to Japanese at your leisure. And we get to see for the very first time in Dark Side of Dimensions, a character has a gun. There's a gun. There are guns in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe in Dark Side of Dimensions. But now we know that 4Kids, being 4Kids, they censored out all of the guns, but they left in future lasers and all that other stuff. So there's that. A lot of the cards, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards here, there was a lot of censorship stuff, but I just pulled out a random card. So this isn't one that actually got censored, because naturally, shirtless buff dudes are perfectly fine. But lo and behold, we don't want midriffs on women. We can't have that. So we have to get rid of that. Do I have a harpy lady that I could pull out that I could show, or do I feel like searching for one? No, I don't feel like searching for a harpy lady. I do have a harpy lady card that I could show you, but I don't have a copy of the Japanese version. But if you're interested in looking how the card game censored a lot of things as well, then you can feel free to look that up at your leisure, of the OCG versus the TCG in regards to censorship. But in regards to the anime, there's plenty to be had as is. For example, nobody uses guns. They just dramatically point at you. Most of the monsters have been redesigned. Some bust sizes have been reduced. Some cleavage have been covered up. Midriffs have been less midriffy. Skirts have been lengthened, and all this other stuff that you would expect from censorship for kids. But there are some really good things to be had about the 4Kids collection, in that there is Dan Green voicing Yugi, voicing Yami. It is he's one of the best voice actors and one of the most wholesome people you could ever get to know on the social medias and in the conventions. And even Kaiba's voice actor, whose name I can never remember for long. I know the name, I do. I can just never recall it immediately when I need to recall it. I just can't do it. I'm terrible with names. Dan Green I remember because it's just a very it's Dan Green. I was thinking about it earlier, that's why I remembered it. But the other one, Kaiba's voice actor, they're both perfect. Joey's voice actor, he's perfect. Grandpa Moto, he's great. Taya, Tristan had two voice actors. In the first handful of episodes, he was voiced in a more, if you watched Yu-Gi-Oh! The abridged series, that twisted voice that sounds like this is how he sounded in the earlier episodes. And then they changed him to sound less like that. They changed the voice actor into somebody else. If you've watched later versions of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, you would recognize Yusei's voice as the Tristan voice. But I never watched 5Ds. I watched part of GX, maybe the first season of it, and then I stopped because I just didn't. Knowing Kaiba, I just don't think he would make a dueling academy that trained duelists how to be better at the card game than he is. It just went counterintuitive to his character. He would never want that. But hey, maybe he had some character growth. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he's just so high up on his high horse that no one who went to his dueling academies would ever graduate being superior to him. Jaden? No, but I love this series. But GX was just a little bit of a stretch to me at the time. I couldn't really I couldn't really handle GX at the time, but I may take a second look at GX now that I finished the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. I may check out the Japanese version of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, since the Season 4 is only in Japanese and was never dubbed into English, even though 4Kids, to my knowledge, has the license still to Season 4 of GX, and could dub it into English right now if they wanted, but they won't, so they're not going to, I don't think. As it is what it is, it is what it is. Well, let's talk about the anime. Is it good? Yes. Is it something that a newcomer can get into and enjoy? I like it. I like this because it's nostalgic. I watched this when I was a kid back in 2002. I was 9 or 10 years old. I really enjoyed watching this back then on the Toonami and all that good stuff. It was the thing that got me into the card game. I still have my very first card I ever got. And that card being the relinquished card here. And surprisingly in good condition, because I sleeved it almost as soon as I picked it up. This is from the starter deck Pegasus. I was a few months late. I didn't immediately pick up Starter Deck Kaiba until like a week after I picked up Starter Deck Pegasus. But this was my very first Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. Regrettably, I didn't come in at the very start, but I came in a few months later. That's okay. It's okay. But this is relinquished from Starter Deck Pegasus. It is in pretty good condition, probably because I sleeved it as soon as I picked it up. It's been sitting in drawers and in card containers for the past 22 years, but it is in pretty good condition, more or less. There is some frays on the edges here. There might be a little bit of a stain right there, but for 22 years old, for a 9-year-old, that's not too shabby. But yeah, the anime got me into wanting to get the cards, and we did play with the cards on the playgrounds back in elementary. But in the middle school, I kind of fell out of it. By middle school, I think that's when GX was phasing out, and then their 5Ds was coming in pretty soon after GX. What was it, 2007, 2008? By the time GX, if 5Ds is here, I can't exactly remember because I wasn't following Yu-Gi-Oh! After the original Yu-Gi-Oh! But in the first few years, from 2002 to roughly around 2005, I was all over this thing. Mainly because of the Yugi and the Kaiba and the dynamic, but after GX happened, I was wondering where these characters went. And I will bring up one thing from Dark Side of Dimensions that I plan to go into in further detail later, but in Dark Side of Dimensions, admittedly Dark Side of Dimensions came out in about 2016, I think? 2016, somewhere around there. Joey, one of the characters in the main series, one of the main characters, period, he mentions his plans for after graduating high school. He plans to become a professional duelist, he says. He's gonna go on his journey for the shonen protagonist story of Joey becoming the professional duelist that he deserved to be. And when I was watching GX way back in the day, I always thought to myself that Jaden kind of reminded me of Joey. He sounded like a Joey 2.0. And I thought to myself, you know, what if GX could have been about Joey? What if we got rid of Jaden and made it about Joey? He had graduated high school, and he had attended Kaiba's Duelist Academy somehow. It's kind of like a college type of setting, maybe, where people try to go to become professional duelists or whatever. And what if it was about Joey and his continued journey, now that he's no longer the protege to Yugi, no longer just a student of Grandpa Moto, and now that Yami has moved on, it could have been about Joey, and we could have ended the Joey story with Joey beating Kaiba in a duel, because he challenges Kaiba twice in this series. In season 1, he challenges Kaiba as soon as Kaiba gets to the island to save his brother from Pegasus, and Kaiba immediately destroys him. And then, in season 3, after Seto Kaiba had just lost to Yami in the finals, the semifinals, Joey challenges Kaiba for the bronze medal for 3rd place, and Kaiba beats him again, but Joey did put up a stronger fight this time. And I'd never seen season 5 back in the day, so this was my first time watching this. And I thought to myself, I really hope Joey challenges Kaiba a 3rd time, and he actually gets to win. But that never happens. It admittedly never got to happen. We never got to see Joey beat Kaiba. That's felt like a cathartic moment to the guy's character to show that he had finally become a professional duelist on the level of Yami. But it never happened, sadly. Joey was the shonen protagonist. The show kind of needed everybody. I like Yugi, I do, and Yami is also fantastic. But we know they're the king of games. Joey was the underdog. He was the learner. He was us. And getting to see him make his way all the way to the front lines, almost defeating Merrick at one point, was fantastic to see. Sadly, his character was frozen after that moment. He did have some stuff to do in Season 4, which is completely filler. It doesn't exist in the manga. In Season 5, Millennium World Story, in the manga, he still has even less to do. So, losing to Merrick was it. That was his last big moment, outside of losing again to Kaiba for the bronze medal. That was those were his final moments in the big dueling moments. He doesn't really do any dueling in Dark Side of Dimensions, though he mentions that he plans to become a professional. So it's like, this is a missed opportunity to me. This has always felt like a missed opportunity where you could have made a spin-off series. Or even Takahashi could have done it. And in the decade or so after he finished Yu-Gi-Oh!, he could have made a sequel manga about Joey, you know? And, of course, Konami would bank on that, and Shueisha would bank on that, and whoever, what was it, TV Tokyo? I forget the animation company in charge of doing this one in Japan, but they would have jumped to make a sequel anime, especially one that was directly involved from Takahashi. And I still think that you could still do a sequel to the original OG Yu-Gi-Oh!, a spin-off sequel, direct sequel to this, starring Joey in his journey to become a professional duelist. And seeing how we're kind of in somewhat of a dry spell right now. Well, we do have a Go 7 or whatever that one is called, and the one that came out prior to that. They were only 2-year runs, 2 years, and then they ended the anime, and they go to another one. This one was 5 seasons, 5 years, and GX is 4 seasons, 4 years, and I forget how many seasons 5Ds was, but 5Ds was also huge. But after that, I don't really know how long those other ones lasted, maybe about 3 to 4 years each. You could easily come back to this and bring back a big chunk of your audience if you made a sequel series to the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Starring Joey Wheeler, starring Janochi, as he tries to become a professional duelist as he goes across the world, beating all of the opponents. And eventually, you end the series with him dueling Yugi and Kaiba. He beats Kaiba, but maybe we could draw on Yugi, have that be the final, they draw, and you could do a dream series, a sequel series with Joey as the main character. You could do that. You could. Have them all aged up into their college years. Tristan could still be at his father's warehouse working at that. Joey's trying to win tournaments and get prize monies, and he beats Bandit Keith and gets the prize money for that and gets his revenge again. You can do a lot of good stuff there. And you could bring back the nostalgia. You could bring back a lot of fans who were fans of the original era. Fans that wanted to see more from Dark Side of Dimensions. Fans that wanted to see something come from that. Thinking that, oh, are we coming back to Yu-Gi? Or is this just the epilogue? Then we're never going to see anything else. Now, I'll be mentioning Dark Side of Dimensions more later on, but I'm still not going to let that idea of Joey, a sequel series starring Joey, go. I still think that was a missed opportunity, that GX could have been Joey's story. You could have gotten rid of Jaden completely and made it about Joey. But no, they didn't do that. So, that's disappointing. Season 1, though, of this, there's plenty of reviews about this anime, going into the story, going into which censorship differences and all this other stuff. So I usually like to make these a little bit more personal, a little bit more personal to the viewer that is me viewing this stuff. Because if you want an actual review, you could go and easily find one. Though there's not too many about Season 5. Admittedly, I haven't found too many reviews about Season 5. There are 3 things in Season 5 that make up Season 5. That is the Kaiba Grand Prix. Then there's the Capsule Monster Coliseum story, and then finally the Millennium World. Of the 3 little arcs, only the Millennium World is the main season, is the main story, is from the manga. And if you ask me personally, I think you could have carved Season 5 into 2 seasons, making it Season 5 and Season 6. Because Capsule Monster Coliseum was an interesting idea, it just felt kind of rushed. You could have added a handful of episodes to that. But especially, you could have added at least 5 to 10 episodes to the Grand Prix storyline with Siegfried von Schloder and all these other guys. You could have done plenty of stuff there, and showed some of the duelists, showed Sherlock Holmes doing his stuff, and showed the Rebecca doing her stuff, and show off some more duels. Expand it a little bit long, give some more tactics and stuff like that. And I think that could have been good to do. And then expand it to maybe about a 40 episode season 5 of those 2 filler arcs. And then with Millennium World, I think you could extend and expand that by another 10 to 15 episodes. Maybe make it into about 40 episodes for season 6 for the Millennium World storyline, giving you time to breathe with so many of these characters, because admittedly we're rushing through a lot of this stuff in the Millennium World. And I know it's been like, 10 to 15 years since I read some of the manga of Season 5 of Millennium World. In the little manga graphic novels, I used to have the first 2. I don't know where they are anymore. But I remember it wasn't that rushed. We had quite a few chapters, and knowing how anime likes to fluff and fill things out, you could easily make each chapter, or every couple of chapters, into a single episode. And what was it, there like 30 chapters, maybe even 40 chapters in Millennium Worlds. How many graphic novels were there? 7? I gotta look that up. Yeah, there are 7 novels in the graphic novels of the Millennium World, roughly about 8 to 9 chapters each book. And you could easily make an episode out of each of those chapters. You could easily expand and give us some story and some time to breathe with a lot of these characters, and do what the anime does best when it comes to building character off of a single page. A single page in the manga could be extended to about 2 minutes of story, and that could be pretty cool. Sometimes it's not, but you could do more, and I really think that the Millennium World deserves to have a little bit more time spent on it, because it really does feel like a rush. They rushed through, like, what was it, the last 20 episodes? A big story that feels like it could have been 40 episodes, just condensed and smooshed together. So many characters you get to spend time with, like High Priestess Isis, Priest Mahad, and Ashada, and whatever the guy with the Millennium Scales, his name is, and High Priest Seto especially. Seto was the breakout character of Season 5's Millennium World. He really was one of my favorites. He's way better than Seto Kaiba has any right to be. The High Priest Seto is the he was the ancient Egyptian version of Seto Kaiba. He's like his ancient ancestor. He eventually takes over as Pharaoh after Atem, after the Yami, after the Pharaoh defeats the Dark Lord Zork. He gave his life up doing so, and he passed on the rights of Pharaoh to Seto, who is his cousin in the Millennium World storyline. And I thought it could have been pretty interesting to show Seto Kaiba's actual parentage, because we never actually learn who Seto Kaiba's parents are. We never get to learn who Yugi's parents are. Wouldn't it have been pretty interesting if Solomon Moto ended up revealing that his son, he had more than one son, and that Kaiba could have been either an illegitimate child or an orphaned child that Solomon never even learned about because he was put up for you could stretch it a little bit, but they were cousins in the Millennium World, ancient Egypt. I thought, wouldn't it have been like a little bit too cliched maybe, but then there's so many people who are reincarnated as of the modern day with the revival of the Shadow games, that this would not be too far-fetched to make Kaiba and Yugi cousins and make them actually family. It wouldn't have been too far-fetched. Kaiba could have found his real family in that, and his greatest rival is actually, it would have been a nice little bow for the character of Kaiba, but that didn't happen. So many characters did get there. I think I'm thinking maybe mostly because he didn't want to sign too many new characters, Takahashi, that is. I think it's mainly because he mostly didn't want to do that because he's reusing so many characters for his Millennium World. Isis is basically a Shizu. Shada looks a lot like Shari. Seto is Kaiba. And then Pharaoh Watama is basically Yami, Yugi. There's Shimoa. I forget his full. I'm guessing it's Shimoa. I forget his name, but he's basically Grandpa Moto back then. Akinadin has a hairstyle that looks like Pegasus, and he's the wielder of the Millennium Eye, and he's Seto Kaiba's father. That is pretty interesting, but he doesn't sound like or looks like Pegasus in the Millennium World thing, and I do think that if you added Pegasus to that would have been a little bit too far-fetched, so I'm glad they didn't do that. But there's a lot of people that are reincarnated into the modern day from this specific era, because we're replaying the Shadow games in the modern day with the storyline of what's going on here. So, making Seto, Kaiba, and Yugi related in some way, I think, could have enhanced the story a little bit. Kaiba was always the one alone with just Mokuba, and Kozaburo Kaiba was the adopted father. He wasn't his real father. Kaiba finding his family could have been pretty fun to see for a final little thing of his until he tries to go chase after Yami in Dark Side of Dimensions. I'm gonna get to that. He's the best character in that movie. But in Season 5, Seto Kaiba, he doesn't really do much in the Millennium World. His big moment is in the Kaiba Grand Prix, where he beats Von Schroeder. That's his best moment back then. His second best moment is where he screws the rules again in the Millennium World and says, you know what, I don't know where I am, I don't know if this is a dream or reality, but I don't like you. So he summons his blue eyes from a dual disc. He just summons on his arm, he just plays his blue eyes white dragon, summons the ultimate dragon, and attacks the Zork. It was excellent. That was the second best moment for Season 5 for Seto Kaiba. But after that, his third best moment is during the last duel with Yugi versus Yami, where Kaiba finally admits that Yugi is the king of games and gives him a modicum of respect. That was another really good moment for the character. And I like the closing for the Yugi versus Yami duel. That was an incredible duel. That was really good. I do think you could have extended it from a 4-parter to maybe a 5 to a 6-parter, though. I really do think you could have extended that. But not necessarily make the duel itself 6 episodes, but like make the last duel mini arc a little bit longer. Because that final episode just suddenly ends. It just suddenly ends, and that's probably why we got Dark Side of Dimensions to begin with. It just suddenly, it's gone. Maybe it's because Takahashi was leaving the door open for him to return to the story, to return to these characters. That's why he left the book open, so to speak. But he never did come back. So that final episode, that final chapter, we just don't see too much of resolution. It's just, the duel ends and Yami goes to the spirit world, and that's that. That's all. Another thing that I really didn't like about this, and I don't know if it's in the Japanese version as well, but at least the 4Kids version, the passage of time doesn't necessarily match the characters and their ages. For example, in the movie, Pegasus mentions to Kaiba, not Dark Side of Dimensions movie, the actual first movie, that's the one that's set after Battle City. Pegasus mentions to Kaiba that he's been trying to beat Yugi for years. I don't like that. I think it needs a little bit more polish. For example, a typical Japanese high school is about 3 years, 3 floors, 3 years. Maybe you could time skip it. Maybe season 1 could be, like season 0 rather, could be the first year of high school. The first year, Yugi's first year, that's when he first meets all these other new students. Maybe he was friends with Taya throughout the lower tier school, middle school, and all that stuff. He was friends with Taya then. He meets Joey and Tristan and Kaiba and Bakura in his first year of high school. And then Battle City could be in his second year of high school, right? And the movie could take place during his final year of high school. That means 2 years could have passed since he first dueled Kaiba. So Pegasus mentioning a couple years have passed as he's been trying to beat Yugi. That could make sense. That could be okay. They be in their senior year, their final year of high school. And that could work. And since 4Kids wants to pretend that Yugioh takes place in America, just mentioning that it's the freshman year for the first story, for the first fight with Kaiba, and mentioning that there may be juniors or sophomores during Battle City, and that they're seniors in the finale in the movie, and then the final 2 seasons they could be seniors in high school by then. And or maybe even juniors. Actually, yeah, juniors. They were juniors. You could say they were juniors, right? And that would make a little bit more sense. 2 years could have passed, and then with Dark-Sided Dimensions, you could say that that's in their senior year of high school, the final week of school, before they all graduate to go to college and all that stuff. You know, maybe. Kaiba could just be such a genius that he graduates 2 years early with whatever. He skips ahead a grade immediately, while Yugi doesn't because he's too busy not doing. He wants to stick around with his friends for as long as possible. You know, Joey's low marks, Tristan's low marks. You know, you could try to make a little bit of sense here, but they just don't. They just don't mention the time. It just doesn't match with their appearances. All of this entire book here, even Dark-Sided Dimensions, which takes place some undisclosed amount of time later, it's all within their high school years. Japanese high school or American high school for 4Kids version. It's all within high school. You know, that's implied for 4Kids version, 4 years. For Japan, I think it's 3 years. I could be wrong. But I think middle school is 4 years and high school is 3 years. I could be wrong. I'm not too sure. But at least in regards to the video games, the Japanese high schools like Persona, there is 3 years. So, who knows? Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But either way, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is contained within high school, right? The entire story is contained within the high school years, and they just don't really disclose how much time has been passing. And another thing I really didn't like was how, after Battle City, they really do they get rid of Serenity, a big inspiration for Joey that you could have kept around for Season 4, at the very least. Serenity, maybe you could mention how Serenity, much like Duke Devlin, lives on the West Coast, and they're on the East Coast with Domino City in an undisclosed location. But they have to go to California to find Pegasus. Pegasus flies them out there, and then he vanishes. But maybe you could have reunited with Serenity there, you know, maybe. But they didn't do that. They did bring Duke Devlin back. Duke Devlin gets to come back. What the filler likes to do with Rex and Weevil, I didn't really care for either. You get the impression that they're top regional winners in Battle City and the first 2 seasons. You get the feeling that they're regional champions and stuff like that. But outside of that, you don't really get the impression that they're friends. I don't think Rex Raptor would ever be friends with somebody like Weevil, but that's just me. Because, when Rex found out that Esperoba, depending upon which version you're watching, was cheating against him using his psychic crap and all that stuff, Rex is very upset about that. Rex likes to beat people using his sheer power, and when people are cheating, he's not a big fan of that, And Weevil is the cheater. He likes to cheat, and Rex probably would hate him. He really would. But, making them best friends kind of messes with things a little bit in Season 4 for me, but it's not a big gripe. And I especially like what Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series does with that, making the Beavis and Butthead. That was perfect. And it really was. They show up again for Kaiba's Grand Prix, since it's another filler arc. The last time you see these two is in Battle City, really, in the manga. You don't see them again. The big change with Mai in Season 4, I really wasn't a big fan of, especially with the dub. The English, the 4Kids dub, and trying to explain Mai's motivations. It doesn't really do much there. They try to give you a PTSD angle for Mai, but it doesn't really make sense. And especially given the romantic angle here, Joey's supposed to be like 16 to 17 years old here, and I understand this is anime Japan, but over here in the land of cowboys and aliens, we don't. Mai's like 25, man. It was pretty off kilter while rewatching this 22 years later. I wasn't thinking about it at all 22 years ago, so I didn't really care. I didn't really care at all. But watching it now, Mai is like 24, 25 years old, and Joey's like 16, 17. That is kind of, you don't want to make a romantic subplot with that. That's kind of a little bit on the nose. Another thing that was really on the nose is Season 3, the first half, the digital world with Noah Kaiba. While I really like the Noah Kaiba stuff, with expanding Seto's storyline, how Gozaburo already had a son, but the son was in a pretty bad accident, and Seto was the replacement son to take over the company. I like that backstory addition, but the Big Five and their angle, it's a little bit on the nose to me. Okay, so they capture Yugi, Joey, Tristan, Taya, Duke Devlin, Serenity, Kaiba, and Mokuba. The Big Five are trapped in the digital world, and they need 5 bodies to get out into the living world. So Yugi, Duke, Joey, and Tristan make sense. There's 4 bodies here, and I get the impression that Noah wants to take Kaiba for himself, leaving the 5th of the Big Five to take either Taya or Serenity's bodies. These are middle-aged men. It doesn't really work. No, it doesn't really work at all. Serenity is like, what, 12 to 13? I know, it's anime. She doesn't look 12 to 13, but she is. Taya at least is 16, but this is no. What are you doing, Penguin Man? No. What are you doing, Robot Man? No. You had to add at least another person here. This whole taking over the bodies thing just really, you could have given it a little bit more thought. You really needed to. But again, 23 years later, I mean 21 years later, 21 years ago, I didn't care. But now that I've aged 21 years, it's kind of a little bit on the nose there. So some stuff definitely didn't age too well. It definitely didn't age too well at all. What else is there in this anime that's a little bit on the nose? Yami's stuff in season 4 that's been mentioned a few times. How Raphael and Darts imply that maybe the Pharaoh was evil back in the day. This is missing some context. In Takahashi's season 0, in his first, I want to say 7 graphic novels, the first 7 novels, about 8 to 9 chapters each novel, so about 60 to 70 chapters. In his first 60 to 70 chapters of his original Yu-Gi-Oh idea, Yami was not necessarily a good hero like the Dan Green 4Kids version. So, getting the implication that Yami the Pharaoh was evil isn't exactly sense-making, since we never really got season 0, the anime, to America in English dub. We never got it. It's by a different company as well. I want to say it was Toei or Funimation that was in charge. Not Funimation. Toei was in charge of of the season 0 anime, and that never got brought over. And this anime is by a different company. Is by a different group of people. That's why they applied a lot of stuff that was in season 0 into this, such as when Yami and Bakura fight and their friends became the monsters. That was in season 0. Yugi versus Kaiba when he used Exodia, that was in season 0. The Capsule Monsters little mini arc, 12-episode mini arc, was based off a chapter where Yami faced off against Mokuba, playing Capsule Monsters in season 0. A lot of stuff in that, it was all in season 0. In season 0, Yami was not a good guy. He was a vengeful spirit who really was a king of games. Yes, and he used games to basically become what is very much like a Saw villain, Kramer type of person, where he played dangerous and deadly shadow games against Yugi's bullies and messed them up big time when the bullies lost. And usually the games were rigged against them to begin with. Yami was very much a vengeful spirit, and I'm pretty sure a couple people have actually died from his punishments back in the day. And into season 1 with Duelist Kingdom, Yugi becomes aware of Yami, and he's scared of him, because Yami was willing to kill Kaiba to win the duel, because losing was not an option for Yami. That's what scared him in actuality. When we see that in the season 1 of the anime without that context, Yugi's being afraid of Yami and all that stuff doesn't really make as much sense. Though Kaiba standing on the edge of the thing, that part did make sense as of at least the context of season 1. Because Kaiba is aware that Pegasus has captured Mokuba, and he's captured his soul or whatever into a card or whatever, and Kaiba rethinks that Yugi can't beat Pegasus, so he has to do it. And if Kaiba fails in defeating Yugi, then he never gets to save his brother. And a life without his brother isn't necessarily a life Kaiba wishes to live. Which is why Kaiba stood on the edge of the castle and said, "If you beat me, I may fall off to my death." And Yugi didn't want to do that to him, didn't want to risk that. But that makes perfect sense to me, as somebody who has a lot of care for their siblings. You wouldn't want to have that ultimatum shoved upon you. you could not afford to lose. Yami could certainly afford to lose. There's plenty of star chips on the island. He can easily get 5 more to come back, and he does. But Yami doesn't think in that manner. He can't lose. So that context we're missing is from Season 0. And the whole dark, vengeful spirit angle makes more sense in Season 4 with that context. But since we lack that context, we never got that season, it kind of is a little bit not making sense much, because from the anime's 4Kids perspective, the Dan, Green, Yugi, and Yami, he's pretty much been a hero this whole time, and the only reason why he used the seal of Orichalcos in Season 4 is because he was going to lose a duel. There were no stakes. Raphael hadn't played the seal of Orichalcos. If he lost that duel, that's all that would happen. He would just lose. He wouldn't lose his soul. Nothing would have happened. Raphael would have just smirked and whatever. But, it's just a little bit doesn't make sense when you lack Season 0's context. Admittedly, luckily, when Viz was making the graphic novels of the Shonen Jump lineup of manga, which included Yugioh, they did bring Season 0 into the West world in the Season 0 manga of volumes 1 through 7 of just Yugioh. They differentiated this into 3 versions. There's Yugioh, which is volumes 1 through 7. There's Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist, which is the middle area, which is all of this up to Season 3, up to the end of Battle City. And then there is the third one called Yu-Gi-Oh! Millennium World, which is volumes 1 through 7 again. I don't know if that's how it is in Japanese. I didn't study that one too much. I just wanted to talk about the actual anime, the 4Kids anime itself. I think the weakest arc is the capsule monsters, but I also think it's the most interesting, because it utilizes very different game. It's a very different game compared to a lot of other things. I just think it needed to have a little bit more rules, a little bit more defining applications, like how the Capsule Monsters game in Season 0 worked out, how that Yami played with Mokuba. If you added a little bit more rules to this game, I think it would have been really interesting. A lot like how the Dungeon Dice Monsters game, little spin-off game, happened at the end of Season 1, I want to say, at the end of Season 1. Dungeon Dice Monsters is incredible. I loved it. I really think that was a missed opportunity not to do more Dungeon Dice Monsters. To my recollection, volumes 1 to 7 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Regular Season 0, Takahashi wanted to celebrate games in general, not just Duel Monsters, the card game, but all games. He made up games. He came up with new games. He put new twists on older games, and it was pretty interesting to see each new game, each new arc was a different game that was played. Like how his finale against Yami Bakura was a Dungeons and Dragons type of story. In Season 1, it's just the card game, but in the actual Season 0, in the manga and in the anime, it was a Dungeons and Dragons story, and that was pretty interesting. It really was. I really liked that. And you kind of get that Dungeons and Dragons-esque type of idea in Season 5's Millennium World storyline, when they're sitting across from each other at a little game board, kind of like a Dungeons & Dragons Game Master type of thing. That was pretty interesting. But overall, this is a very good time, but there are a lot of missed opportunities, and there are a lot of things that didn't age well. The 4Kids dub is very campy, and a lot of it doesn't really, it's not good. But if you watched it when you were younger in 2002 through 2005, I think watching through this would not hurt. If you're a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you came in with 5Ds, if you came in with GX, if you came in with Zexals or Vrains, going back to this probably won't hurt. But if you've never watched Yu-Gi-Oh! At all, watching the 4Kids dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! May not exactly be your favorite cup of tea. I would recommend reading the manga instead, because the manga is excellent, but some of the filler in here is admittedly pretty good. If you want to argue, almost half of this is filler. The first 2 seasons are based off the manga. And then in Season 3, half of Season 3 is filler. Season 4, the entirety of Season 4 is filler. Half of Season 5 is filler. So, technically, if you want to get technical, 3 seasons worth of anime is based off the manga, and 2 seasons worth is filler in the 4Kids anime. You could skip the Capsule Monsters thing and you wouldn't miss anything. You could skip Season 4 and Kaiba's Grand Prix and you would not miss anything. Watching it just gives you more, even if they break the continuity and break the lore. But filler does that all the time. If you watch Dragon Ball, filler breaks the lore all the time. But if you enjoyed it as a kid, you would enjoy it as an adult due to the nostalgia factor. I enjoyed Season 4 when I was younger, so I enjoyed it again for the nostalgia factor, even if the world of duel monsters, the Dark Magician Girl being like the princess of Duel Monsters Kingdom or whatever, kind of a little not working lore-wise. But overall, it's a fun time. It was a fun time. And watching through this, I got to go through all of my old cards and really get to feel nostalgic again for Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I have a lot of cards here. I don't feel like pulling all of them out, but I've got a fair bit. I have another relinquished here. Here's Cesario, Black Panda, blah, blah, blah. You know, this one's my most beat up card. Dragon Zombie. I guess I must have played this on the actual pavement as a 9-year-old, actually. This is from Starter Deck Yu-Gi-Oh! I must have actually played this on street pavements without a sleeve as a kid. But you could tell that a 9-year-old really played with these cards. He really enjoyed them. We have Rush, Regulusly, Rival, all that stuff. I even have some Japanese cards here, like this one here. This is pretty good Water Monster. It's a 6-star card, just 1 tribute, and it has 2400 attack. Being a water monster, you could play this with Umi and do pretty well for yourself. But this is how they used to look. This is how the Japanese cards used to look versus our let me pull out here we go. This is how they would look by comparison. This is how the American cards would look. This is how your Japanese cards would look, and that's how they kind of looked in the anime, right? And then on the back, that's OCG. That's TCG. Yay! But I got to pull out all of my old cards and lament at a 9-year-old's destruction of most of them. They're worthless. Most of these are worthless, though admittedly this relinquished is actually in pretty good condition. I probably should sleeve this. This is another one from Starter Deck Pegasus. I must have gotten 2 of them. But I have 3 relinquished, really. Yeah, I got to go through all of my old cards and really reminisce and enjoy how I used to play this card game as a kid. And I missed it in a way. I played a lot of the video games. I played Forbidden Memories, Duelist of the Roses, Capsule Monsters Coliseum, The Sacred Cards. I've got Millennium Duels for the PS3 that I'm going through. The games are a fun time, and I think they're what I will probably stick to going into the future. Like the next Yu-Gi-Oh game I'm probably gonna get is Legacy of the Duelist, the Link Monsters version, the one with like 10 to 11,000 cards in it. Oh gosh, I'm already getting a little bit overwhelmed in Millennium Duels, having won almost just under 700 cards, and I'm trying to look through them all to see what most of them do, and keeping track of 10,000 is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. But at least I have been reinvigorated as a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, thanks to going through this. I've made a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh videos, so if you're tired of it, then I'm probably going to be making one more, and then we're going with something else. I'm probably going to be making a Dune comparison video pretty soon, where I compare the 2-part Dune movies from Denis Villeneuve to the early 2000s miniseries that I have that stars William Hurt as the Father Atreides guy, and there's a couple other guys in there whose names I keep forgetting, but there is a miniseries, and there is a fair bit of changes, a little bit of differences from the new movies and the miniseries, and I'm gonna be rewatching the miniseries pretty soon to refresh my memory so that I can compare that. That's coming up. And then I'm doing Dark Side of Dimensions. That'll be the last Yu-Gi-Oh thing for a while, at least, until I probably come in and make a video on Millennium Duels, the video game. I make one about that. But yeah, I have nothing else to mention about the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. The 4Kids anime is very dear to me, even though I know it is inferior in almost every way to the original Japanese version that's unedited. I would recommend you watch that one subtitled over this one if you're looking for the purest Yu-Gi-Oh experience. But if you know the Dan Green meme, if you liked the 4Kids voice acting team, and they are very talented, then definitely you owe it to yourself to give the Yu-Gi-Oh 4Kids dub a look. At least a look. Watch the Duelist Kingdom and how they broke all the rules. But back then, that was like when the card game, I don't even know if it existed at the time. Takahashi was just making a parody off of Magic the Gathering, to my knowledge. So they were just rolling out of the ballpark with no idea what they were doing. He was just designing monsters and all that stuff and pushing it. It's a good time to see the evolution of this card game, going from the first season when there were no rules to the final season where there are again no rules. It's a good time, at least to me it was. I will cherish this box set. And oh, I didn't go over Bonds Beyond Time. I forgot about that. I guess I'll have to make another video about that one. So 2 Yu-Gi-Oh videos are coming up. One about Bonds Beyond Time and one about Dark Side of Dimensions. And maybe one about Millennium Duels, the video game. But after that, those 3, that's, unless I come back with GX, I won't decide to watch that. But that's all the Yu-Gi-Oh for now. For now.